Grab your feed bags, Wargamers, because today we're coming at you live from the parking lot of a Chili's. Wow, our production values are great, aren't they? Here's some palm trees to make it look very lovely, very topical. What can I tell you? I just got done listening to Uncle Adam's latest video on how balanced war games are a fool's errand, and I wanted to talk to you about that. Hey, this is the joy of wargaming. We think about wargaming on our drive into work. We think about it all the time. We're very excited to talk about these things, and the best I can do, unfortunately, for wargaming ambiance is the face hugger that I wear when I'm gaming out my War in the Vendée scenarios using Ospreys on guard. I want to add to what Uncle Adam had to say about balance in war games and how you never really achieve that. Even using a highly sophisticated 30-year-old algorithm to generate equivalent balanced point cost figures for armies, it doesn't really happen. There are two factors that he didn't talk about, and this video is not a criticism of anything he said. Uncle Adam nailed it. Everything he said was absolutely right. I'm just adding that there's a couple more variables that you need to consider when you're creating war game scenarios. And those two scenarios are the objectives and the terrain. Not only do you have to think about those two factors, you have to think about how those factors interact with each other and with all of the other factors that Uncle Adam discussed in his video. If you have an army list that is very shooty, it's very attack-oriented, and you go up against an army that is very defensively oriented, then if you're both attacking the same objective, how things play out can vary wildly. An attack-oriented army that is handed a scenario, defend this strong point, is going to be disadvantaged compared to an army that is built explicitly for defense. They both might be worth 1,500 points, and all other factors being the same, the attack army is disadvantaged by the rules of the scenario. You also run into a situation where terrain also plays a role. Some army lists allow you to buy an army that is built for maneuver, and if you find yourself on a table with a lot of maneuver blocking terrain, you are going to be at a disadvantage compared to someone who has bought an army that ignores terrain, an army that can move through terrain, or an army that is built for ambushing from terrain. That same army might cost 1,500 points, and on a table that is littered with terrain, the ambushers are going to do fantastic. On the other hand, if you've got one forest in the center of the table and the rest is all plains, those same 1,500 points, or 12 points, or whatever rule system you're using, are going to be worth a lot less, and you're going to find yourself at a big disadvantage. So then you also have the issue of, well, maybe I'm really good at attacking in open space, and I'm really terrible at attacking through terrain. Or maybe I'm better at attacking through terrain. So now you've got additional variables that have to be accounted for in your algorithm for generating the, quote, point costs. And that is essentially the point that I wanted to add, is that in addition to special abilities and all that, you've got the actual constraints of the game itself. Now, some games do a pretty good job with the terrain. In fact, Infamy by Two Fat Lardies includes and that's just one example. A lot of games do this. I'm just calling it out because I was watching a video the other day about how the terrain placement works. It's actually a sub-game within the game where you break up the table into various sectors, and then you roll dice to see how much terrain is in each of those sectors, and based on how much terrain, you roll for what kind of terrain, and based on what kind of terrain, you roll for placement, and players can have some influence over what terrain is placed and where, which is important, because some armies want to have lots of ambush points, and they want to have terrain that's in good tactical position for them. So in some cases, you can use terrain as a balancing factor. Yeah, you as the ambushers are going to have a lot fewer dudes, but the game balances that out, and I'm not sure how. I've never played the game, but a lot of attempts are made to balance out the fact that I've got weaker fighters, but they're a lot more flexible. But you don't know where they're at. You as the player have to use those figures in an intelligent way to make them the equivalent of their higher point-based opponents. Moving on, we now come to the real crux of the issue. What's the point? Well, I would argue, I shouldn't say argue, I would encourage you to think about abandoning the pursuit of the truly balanced war game. And Uncle Adam touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth emphasizing that historical engagements are typically not balanced. If you find yourself in a fair fight, you've made a lot of mistakes, and you as a leader need to go back and reevaluate all of the life choices that led you to the point that you're engaged in a fair fight. Your opponent gets a vote, and he doesn't want a fair fight either. So, when we sit down to war game scenarios, whether they be Waterloo or Gettysburg, Gettysburg is a classic example where the terrain played an enormous role over how the battle went. If you reversed the sides and gave Lee the position of defense and Grant the position of attack, you would have had a very different outcome. You didn't change the points of the armies at all. But just because of all the preliminaries that led up to the battle, you've changed the balance of things. And so don't be afraid to play unbalanced scenarios. The war games are a lot like real life. Sometimes you get dealt a bad hand. All you can do is the best that you can with what you've got. That's the real message of learning how to embrace the complexities of war games. Sometimes you find yourself behind the 8 ball through no fault of your own. All you can do is the best you can with what you've got. Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you say, look, I know I'm going to lose this war game. I was in one of the most fun experiences I've had at a war game table was at Gen Con back in the early 90s, where I sat down and the organizer said, look, you are going to lose this war game. And I said, wait, well, that's a bit rude. What if I want to win? And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, then you probably shouldn't have signed up to play the Texans at the Alamo. And I shrugged and said, well, that's a good point. And what he did, he said, look, we all know the Texans are going to lose. That's historically what happened. Look at the figures on the table. You are outnumbered 10-1. If you're defending the Alamo, you're going to lose. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a winner on the Texan side and a winner on the Mexican side. And the winner on the Texan side is whoever kills the most Mexican attackers. And, I got it the other way around. The Mexican winner, I think it was like 6 players on 6 players. And the Mexican that kills the most Texans wins for the Mexican side. And the last Texan soldier standing wins for the Texan side. So that was a way of saying, look, all of these figures are worth the exact same amount of points. The Texans have 1/10 of the points, but they have a very solid defensive position, and they have the objective of holding out for as long as they possibly can. If memory serves, this was 30 years ago. If memory serves, there was also a point at which lasting a certain number of turns meant that you, as the Texan side, could feel good that you did better than the historical Texans, right? So that's another way of balancing things out. And it was wildly unbalanced. I knew I was going to lose, and I was actually the first Texan to go out because I was way far away from the mission house. Luck of the draw. I got the weakest position to defend. I did the best I could with what I got, and I had an absolute blast doing it. Now, caveat, I'm not a tournament player. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it for love. So if you are a war gamer who's in this hobby for the love of the game, if you want to learn, if you want to use it to help you learn about life and to become a better person, then just stop worrying so much about balance. Yeah, it's one factor to consider, and it's something to kind of strive for, but don't worry so much about it. Throw a bunch of forces on the table and look at the situation and go, yeah, you know what? These guys are totally boned. There's only 300 of these Greeks. Let's see how many, but they're in a pretty good position, all things considered. Let's see how many turns they can hold out against the overwhelming weight of the Persians. If I can last, the historical result, the Romans only lasted 10 turns. If I can last 12, Leonidas can get bent because I'm a better general than him. And that's the fun of the game. That's part of the joy of wargaming, and that's the kind of thing we pursue here. Do the best you can with what you got. on the table, off the table, in life in general. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Because at the end of the day, we all know who wins, right? Yeah, we do. But it's not going to happen without a little... Well, I mean, it's going to happen. But we can help make it happen by praying for each other. And we conclude this message by saying, as always, I'm praying for you, dear Wargamer. I'm praying for you.